Hiya! How are you all doing on this lovely sunny day? It's Thursday, the week is almost over, the sun is shining, I'm leaving this weekend, so everything is fantastic. Anyways, I'm here today because I actually wanted to share an anecdote, something that I've observed a few days ago in my life. And I wanted to use that to introduce a couple of concepts which can be useful for you in terms of communication in relationships. Let's picture, first of all, a scene where the husband is home, the wife is out, the wife comes back and finds the place really messy as she left it. So it looks like the husband didn't pull his weight in. We're not going to stop on this. We can talk about this another time. Now, the wife initially has a very strong response, and she begins taunting her husband. She begins saying, I had asked you, I told you, why didn't you do it? Why didn't you do anything? Look at what a mess. What are you good for? Blah, 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 blah. So a lot of criticism going the husband's way. Now, what do you think the husband is going to do? Do you think he's going to get up and help? Or do you think he's going to get defensive? Because my bets are that he's going to get defensive. He's not going to get up and help. Now, let's imagine the same scene in which the wife enters the house, sees the situation, looks at the husband and says, babe, the house is a mess. Can you help me tidy up? In this tone. Now, what was different in these two transactions? So these were transactions, meaning there were exchanges between two people. Now, the first transaction was a very critical transaction, and it led to an outcome which is less than ideal. The second transaction, on the other hand, led to the outcome that was desired, which was to have the partner help, and almost voluntarily. So quite a substantial difference here. Now, let us get into a little bit of the psychology of all of this. In the first scene, when the wife comes back disgruntled and begins expressing her criticism and her discontent, she is coming from something which is called the critical parent ego state. Now, let's talk about ego state for a moment. There is a psychological theory which is called transactional analysis, which is meant to observe and analyze and explain transactions between human beings. So interactions, any kind of interaction between two or more people. Byrne was the founder of the school of psychology, and what he said was that in each one of us live three different ego states. At any given time, we have a parent ego state, an adult ego state, and a child ego state. Now, this does not mean that you're an actual parent, an actual child, an actual adult. We're not talking about that. We're talking about ego state, so something which is within us. We all have all of the three ego states within us. We simply switch between one and the other as we go along in life. So, let's go back to the transaction between the husband and wife. The first transaction was between what? A critical parent? What kind of reaction you think that will get? So the critical parent generally will address somebody who's going to respond as a rebellious child, simply because the transaction was set in that fashion. So we have the critical parent here taunting, and the reaction is that the defensiveness of the child comes in, and the person begins defending himself, arguing back, and definitely doesn't want to get up and do the work, which is ultimately the outcome that we want. Now, in the second scenario, when instead the wife goes and says, look, the house is a mess, could you please give me a hand and let's clean this out? She is coming from a completely neutral perspective in a way, and that is what we call an adult ego state. When she comes from an adult ego state, the chances are that the response is going to be in an adult ego state. The transaction which is adult to adult is an equal transaction, and it's a functional transaction. Transactions which are crossed, so parent-child, parent-adult, adult-child, mixed transactions basically tend to be dysfunctional. Why? Because they set in motion behaviors which are less than the desired ones, and they're not going to lead to the result that you want. They're more likely to lead into an argument, a big fight, than to just simply get the house freaking clean and everybody can move on with their lives. So I know there's a lot more to say about ego states and about transactions, but the reason why I wanted to give you this example was just to say, think about what kind of what ego state you're coming from when you communicate. And by communication, I don't only mean verbal, I mean non-verbal as well, because if you start throwing things around, that's still communication, and that's passive aggressive as well. So think about what ego state you come from to in some way allow the other person to respond from a functional ego state and not have what is called a cross transaction, so one that does not function. Next time you find yourself in a similar situation, think about 3 different ways that you can express the same concept. So this can be even an exercise without you actually facing anything. You can simply think, okay, this that I want to communicate to so-and-so. It doesn't have to be your partner, it can be anybody. This is what I want to communicate. What would this look like if it were said by a parent ego state? What would this look like if it were said by an adult ego state? What would this look like if it were said from a child ego state? And then think about what kind of reactions you might be setting off. So having said this, I know it's been a long time already, and I've just touched on a little concepts of TA and of communication in couples or in relationships. I know there's so much more to discuss about this. There's so many more useful tips that can be used in relationships and that can help you leave all these petty arguments which are really not necessary. They just come out of miscommunication and cross transactions, and instead have a peaceful and joyful relationship, whoever that other person is. So what I would recommend is give a try to the exercise, let me know, and other than that, any questions, any comments, any thoughts, reflections, I'm here, I'm happy to chat, so please go ahead, leave me a comment, drop me a direct message if you're feeling shy. I'm happy to be here and to answer all your questions. Have a lovely rest of the week, and I'll see you soon.